vlog of mine. I hope that you all are having a great day thus far, because I know I am. Yeah, tongue twister. I know I am. So today is going to be kind of a boring, maybe plain vlog, depending on how you take it. So another thing that I'm known for is that I am a huge bookworm, and I have dozens of books around my apartment. I have tons more in my mother's house that I'm hoping to bring with me because I love them so much. So ever since I've started reading when I was little, I just love books. I just love, the idea of being able to identify with a character and follow them along their journey throughout the book. I'm very big on novels, particularly mystery novels. I'm a huge fan of mystery novels because it kind of keeps you on the edge of your seat. But I'm also into the nonfiction and autobiographies of, artists or musicians in particular that I admire. And I think my relationship with reading is kind of a very spiritual thing. It's because it really keeps me grounded, and I use it as a part of my morning rituals. So I tend to get up really early. I'm a morning person through and through. And one of the things I usually do in the morning is that I'll make a cup of coffee or drink water, and then I'll read a book that I'm currently going through. And admittedly, my relationship to reading has always been one that was a way for me to get in touch with my inner child. And that's something that's been very big to me these past couple of years. It's just really getting in tune with my inner self, my inner child, and not really losing that imagination that I think all of us as humans should have, right? But, the downside of reading for me was, the amount of schooling that I had to do. So kind of like a sidetrack story, I went to early college, high school, starting in 2013, and that meant that I took both high school and college courses at the same time. And I did that for 4 years. Granted, the program is a 5-year program, but I managed to finish a year early, thankfully. With that, my relationship to reading kind of went down, and I kind of avoided reading all of my chapter books that I had bought, for my own self-enjoyment, because I was very zoomed in and focused and really just kind of bombarded with all the reading assignments that I had to do. And when I went to college, I thought that it was going to get better. I was going to get back to reading again and just doing things that I enjoyed, right? But it kind of dwindled more because I had even more readings to do, and I was an international studies major in college, so it was a lot of historical readings, political readings. So my passion for reading slowly went down the drain, and it really made me sad because reading has always been one of my favorite pastimes, and it was a way for me to kind of escape, certain things that were going on with me, dealing with mental health and dealing with anxiety and depression. Reading was one of the ways for me to just kind of escape and kind of live out the lives of the characters in those stories that I would read. But nowadays, being that I'm more settled, I'm more grounded in my own space, it kind of allows me more time to read and, take part in those morning rituals where I'm just reading in silence with no devices, no electronics, no background noises, just me, my book, my cup of coffee or my water, and I'm reading it out loud to myself. And that's actually what I did this morning before I recorded this vlog. So my advice to people who kind of have that kind of stigma that reading is boring or it makes you, uncool or a nerd, and I was called that a lot. There's no reason to feel guilty about reading, especially for fun. Because for one, you're having a very healthy way of spending time with yourself, or even those around you. And that makes it even more fun if you have like a little book club or whatnot. And also, mentally, it can provide a sense of relief, depending on the novel and the content of the book, of course. And it's just a great way to pass the time. Instead of like scrolling through your social media feed, you can flip the pages of a book, and it can be gratifying to just dive deep into a story and getting to know a character or characters and see how they develop throughout the story. So that would be my advice to those who are still kind of iffy about, reading and whatnot. And personally, my goal is to read at least 5 books throughout this entire year. I'm almost finished with one of my books that I have here, so I'm really excited about that. And I think I completed another book, but I'm not sure because I have tons of bookmarks in my books. So it kind of shows how I've been slacking off. But I have a legit reason. I work from home now. I work remotely, completely remote. So that takes up a lot of my time as well. So with that being said, I would like to show you at least a couple of my books and give you some brief synopsis of each one. So this is the one I'm currently reading, and I'm almost finished with this book. It's called The Sound of Waves by 𝑔𝑜𝑜𝓹, and it's basically about a fisherman boy falling in love with a girl from a higher class, and the relationship becomes the hot topic of attention throughout the village. There's a lot of gossip, not only due to the class, but due to the fact that they're young, they're teenagers, and they're both virgins. So during that period in Japan where the ideas of marriage and waiting until you're married to have sex and start a family, that sort of thing, that was something that was very important during that time period. So there's a lot of cultural, societal themes that are expressed in this book. And not only that, just the vivid imagery and descriptions, and not only the characters, but the scenery of the island in which the story takes place is very beautiful. And 𝑔𝑜𝑜𝓹, he's just a very interesting person as well. And that's like a whole other video I can do on him. But this is highly recommended. Oh, and by the way, I buy all of my books off of thrift books. Very cheap, very affordable. I even bought most of my textbooks off of thrift books when I was in college. And on average, you can spend like $3.99 to $4.99 a pop on a book. And that's like incredible. So whenever I do a book haul, I buy at least 8 to 10 books, which is amazing to me. So that was Sound of Waves. I'm also a big manga fan, so I got my Sailor Moon manga. Granted, I do not have the whole series yet. I'm working on that. It's going to take a while, but I think I can do it. And the thing with manga is that if you can see, it's positioned backwards, and you read from right to left instead of left to right, which was very confusing for me when I first started reading manga, but I think I love it. It's a very interesting concept, and it's essentially a comic book, and mangas are pretty much a cultural staple, a pop culture staple in Japan. So mangas, please read them. And I also mentioned earlier about the autobiography piece, how I like to kind of get to the minds of artists and musicians that I admire, although for pretty obvious reasons they're not going to dive all the way deep into their personal lives, but it is good to have at least a little bit of insight. And I have Moonwalk, I should say, by Michael Jackson. He wrote this autobiography in the mid-80s. It was released in 1988, so I think he was 30 years old when it came out. And to be honest, it is kind of young for him to pen an autobiography, but you have to understand that he achieved so much in his young life up to that point, from being a member of the Jackson 5, being in Motown, from pushing for his creative freedom. He left Motown all the way up to, releasing Thriller and that was like an astronomical success. And this was right around the time that he released his Bad album as well, and that became very successful. So it was just really great to get to know him up to that point. You know, a lot of things happened to him after he written the autobiography, but it really gave a little bit of an insight into the genius that is Michael Jackson. So for those of you who really want to get to know Michael outside of like the press and the malicious things that's written about him, I would highly suggest buying this book. This could be your starting point. I also have a book of poems by him called Dancing the Train. It's in my bedroom, but I decided not to bring it out. And that's another great work of his that's kind of like a way for you to get to know his ideas and, you know, his understanding of nature, you know, of man, and the way that we as humans should conduct ourselves. And of course his spiritual beliefs. He was a very spiritual person, I believe, and it really helps me understand not only, you know, the good aspects of the spirituality, but like very like the dark night of the soul aspects that he had to go through as well, because the man had been through hell in his life, and he passed away so young at the age of 50. So may you continue to rest in peace, Michael. You did good work while you were here. This next one, Franz Kafka. He has like sort of that Orwellian, George Orwell style of writing, and I was introduced to him through college. While I was at American College, I took a class called World Literature and Translation, where we basically read the literature works of famous authors from around the world, and it was translated into English. And Franz Kafka was one of those authors. So this is the actual book that I used during the class, and at first I wanted to sell it, but I was like, let me keep this. And I'm really glad I did, because it's some very insightful novels, but it's also very, I don't know how to describe it. It's kind of like a thriller. It kind of keeps you on the edge of your seat. And the wordplay and the descriptions and pretty much the complexity of the characters is what I really enjoy about his works. The works that are my favorite in here in particular is The Metamorphosis, which is basically about a man who is kind of very isolated from society, and you know, he's battling with his own sick and twisted perversions to the point where he turns into a dung beetle, a huge dung beetle, and his family, they find out about it, and instead of like trying to help him, they just kind of keep him isolated in his bedroom because he's in a beetle form. And in a way, I thought, is he's like literally turned into a beetle, or is this kind of like a figment of his imagination, illusion, or like surrealism in a way? But it's a really great and insightful novel, and it talks about like the power struggle of society, not only, you know, in the higher positions like with the government and the people, but also within the family. You know, that power struggle too, and they're trying to, I guess, kind of make up for the fact that outside in society and in the world, there's a lack of, you know, power, because, you know, they're rendered powerless to, you know, the government and authority. And then another one is The Judgment, which is a short story, but I think I just want to leave it up to you all to read it. Okay, sorry about that. My camera died while I was filming, and I got preoccupied with some other things, so I changed my outfit. So back to the book reviews. I only have a couple more left. So this next book that I have is by the late James Baldwin. He was known as a prominent civil rights activist and leader and writer, and he has really penned some very thought-provoking novels and nonfiction. This is kind of like an anthology of some of his writings and thoughts on certain political and social issues that was going on during the time period, especially during the Civil Rights era. And I just really love reading his work. He's just a huge source of wisdom, and he has so many thought-provoking and insightful things to share. And may he also rest in peace. I think he passed away in 1986. Don't quote me on that, but may he rest in power. He was a great writer. And my last two books are by the same person, Jim Morrison. So Jim Morrison was the leader of one of the most popular rock bands of all time, the Doors. He was known as a very forward-thinking punk rock singer. He was very ahead of his time. He had like a crooner vibe. Like, he was a big fan of Frank Sinatra, so he did have that crooning style in his voice, but he was a rocker as well. And in his books of poetries, this one is The American Night. I'm reading this for like probably the 10th time because this is that good. His poetry is very abstract. It doesn't have like a structure, you know. The lyrical content doesn't always make sense, but in a way he is piecing together a certain form of a concept. And it's just very, very lucid and, you know, sometimes a little dystopian, his works were. But some of his works was very thought-provoking for the times. And just to add another point for reference, Jim Morrison is part of the '27 Club. You know, the group of artists who passed away at the age of 27. He was one of the earlier artists of that club. He passed away in 1970. And the mystery surrounding his death has yet to be solved. So it just adds a little more to the mystique that is Jim Morrison. And also, Jim wanted to be a film director. So in both of these books, he has written like mini scripts from, you know, little film projects that he was trying to complete, because he was a college student at UCLA, and his original career goal was to be a film director before he joined the Doors. And I found that to be pretty cool, because I think that Jim had a very innovative mind and a very creative mind, but at the same time it was very unconventional and centric. And I think I'm very attracted to those kinds of artists. And I can't help but wonder what a Jim Morrison directed movie would be like. Unfortunately, we will never get the chance to see that, but his scripts, you know, it can really make you think about pretty much the grimy and the grittiness of what he was trying to convey, not only in his music, but in his poems. And unfortunately, we wouldn't be able to see it in his films, but I'm pretty sure he was going to go down the same route. So these are highly recommended, especially fans of the Doors. If you are unaware of his book of poems, I would highly suggest that you go look this up. So yeah, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Just kidding. Thank you for, you know, listening and on my books and my book recommendations. I just love to read. I love to read so much. I remember when I used to kind of dissociate myself away from it, because I kind of had that programmed into my mind where, you know, reading was, you know, something that was boring or it wasn't cool or acceptable in society, but I embrace it now. I love to read. It's a way for me to not only escape to another world, but it helps increase my mind and my memory. It strengthens my mind, and it really helps me, you know, keep my creativity going, and, you know, pretty much anything that you can think of mentally, reading helps me with that. And I look forward to seeing you all again soon. I have a lot more things that I want to share with you all. Granted, you know, during this pandemic, this vlog experience has been a way for me not only to share certain things about myself and help y'all get to know me, but it's also a way for me to create in a time where things have been a bit limited. So I really appreciate you guys. So yeah, stay tuned for my next vlog. I have a lot of cool stuff coming up for you guys, along with some updates on future projects that I'm hoping to get started this summer. So thank you all, and stay awesome. And read this book.